and see the finish line. As a gay mom, my kids are deeply engaged in this process with me, and sometimes their perspective is really amazing to me. Kids fundamentally have a sense of right and wrong and what's fair. And here in Illinois, where we have civil unions, they at a very core level understand that it's not the same, and it's not equal, and it's not fair. I mean, in some ways, they look at it the same way as if one of them gets a bigger cookie than the other. I mean, they just get that it's different and it's not right. In the litigation that's ongoing in Illinois, what we are seeking to do, the question at what's at question in the litigation is that fundamental question of, is civil union enough, and where have civil unions failed? And of the 24 couples that are plaintiffs, of the plaintiff couples in the case, there's one couple in particular whose story I really carry with me. They live in my district. They testified before the Senate, and they've testified before the House as well. We've brought them down several times with their children, and they've worked with us one-on-one with legislators as well. And they have a little boy who was critically ill, and he was in the pediatric ICU. And one of the moms was back there with the son. He was 2 years old. He was going into kidney failure, and it was really dire and terrifying. And the other mom arrived from work, I believe, and went to the front desk of the emergency room as you would, and was told, his mom's already back there. Sorry, you can't go in. And and I've done this. I've had this experience as well in hospitals where you're not communicating at your best in those circumstances. And let's start from there. But there's lengthy back and forth, and I can imagine as a mom, and every time I hear the story, I imagine myself standing there. Ultimately, the nurse who controlled the door, and therefore this mom's life, said, well, if you would just say you're the stepmom, I can do it. But they can't. A kid can't have two moms. You're not married. You don't have to let it. So, I mean, it went on and on and on, when really all you want to do is charge the door. And so these are the things that are just fundamental to why we have to get the rest of the way to full equality, because we don't have time to discuss these things at hospital doors. We don't have time to try to make our kids believe that the smaller cookie is a good cookie. Yeah, it's a cookie, but I want the whole cookie. I want the cookie everyone has. My sons have been down in Springfield with me several times, and actually spent a week down there with me last session, and it just happened it just so happened there was an anti-marriage lobby day when they were there, and there were hundreds of folks, and they're wearing these god-awful giant one-man, one-woman buttons, and I shield them a lot from some of the more ugly aspects of my job. But here we are, we were in the middle of it, and there was nothing we could do about it. And they saw, and they heard, and they absorbed an awful lot in that moment. And at one point, we made it back to my office from the floor, and we'd used tunnels. We kind of tried to skirt and avoid much of the rally pieces. And a woman came into the office. She sort of snuck around the back way so that she didn't have to be announced. And she stepped into my office, and she's got the big button on, and my kids and I are just sitting in the office having a snack. And she said, do you mind if I talk to you? And I said, that's fine, but please recognize that my children are here and be appropriate. And she immediately launched into this diatribe about what a real family is, and that experimental families are harmful to children, and I'm cutting her off, and I'm telling her she has to stop. And finally, I threatened to have her removed from the building by security, and then she finally left. And my oldest looked at me, and my kids are 12, and I have one 12-year-old and two 8-year-olds, and my oldest looked at me and he said, Mommy, what has to be wrong with someone's brain that they would talk that way in front of a little kid? Now, he's talking about his little brothers, and I'm more worried about what he's absorbing, because he's actually paying attention. The other two were on their iPads, and they're paying attention. And then he said the most amazing thing, which was, besides, God knows we're a family. How could she be so sure what a family is? And so ultimately, really, this is so harmful to our kids in that they are being sent the messages that they're less than. and that our families are less than. And one of the things I find remarkable, you know, we were talking, Gay and I were having a pop earlier, and we were talking about one of my colleagues, one of the new Republicans who I'm not going to be hanging out with. Her name's Jeannie Ives, visitor. It's really fun. And in one of her earlier diatribes against our families and against our efforts at marriage equality, she talked about how gays and lesbians are trying to weasel their way into acceptability, and that gay people have children to create objects of desire. What was remarkable in that moment is that some of her more conservative colleagues came to me to apologize on behalf of Republicans everywhere. Because they knew me, they know my children. We talk about soccer schedules and parent-teacher conferences. We don't talk about, we're parents. We're just parents, we're just families. And at one point, one of them, a very conservative guy, with whom I almost never vote, said, "Has she come to you to apologize yet?" I really gave at her. I gave her a good talking to last night, and I told her she had to come to you and apologize. And I said, "Do me a favor, tell her not to. It would not be good." And I think she got that message, because she still hasn't. So, you know, there is this perception that you can disparage families, and kids are still that last go place, that last boogeyman. You know, they talk about indoctrinating children in the schools, and they talk about, you know, we're gonna teach homosexuality. You have to teach me anything. I'm just gay. You know, so, but that is still the place where that's the last boogeyman. That's the last scary thing that they can say is going to happen. Because the sky hasn't fallen. We haven't been swallowed up. Nothing bad has happened, because we're just living our lives, and frankly, rather boring lives at that. I mean, we have 3 kids. It's schedules and teacher conferences and softball games and, you know, track meets. It's pretty dry stuff. So ultimately, the impact on families is just that horrible messaging, and it's the messaging that our youth see as well. And what we need to do to counter that message. And the biggest thing we do, marriage equality is huge, and when we get that will send great messages, but we need to keep working on things like bullying, you know, working on making sure that we have strong anti-bullying laws in all of our states, and that our school districts are following through and doing the right thing on that. Because it doesn't just stop when we achieve marriage equality for our families. We have to continue to move forward and make sure that we protect our families, and that our kids are continuing to get the right messaging.